Everybody. Good morning, everybody. I see one returnee in the class. The last time I offered this class was 6 months ago, and since then, a number of things have changed. So this is a new and improved class on steps leading to a federal contract. A few opening remarks here. This is for companies that are wanting to increase their revenue stream by competing for federal contracts. Steps leading up to and through award of a federal contract to a prime contractor. This is not for state, county, or local governments, although there are a lot of similarities. Many of these steps also apply if you want to be a subcontractor. You should have the PowerPoint presentation. Let me know if any of you do not have it. So you can take it and print it out and put your notes on there from the class as we go through and have discussions. A little bit of my background. I retired in 2018 after 29 years in federal procurement, specifically with the Department of Defense as a contracting officer. My experience is mainly with construction contracts, service contracts, and architect engineering contracts, both pre-award and post-award. I started working with PTAC the day after I retired, and enjoying it immensely, helping you figure out the quagmire and bureaucracy of federal contracting. As a contracting officer, I sat across the table negotiating contracts with a lot of contractors. And because I was a contracting officer, there were a lot of things that I couldn't tell you. Now I'm retired and I'm on the other side of the table and I can tell you everything now. So save your questions for the end of this presentation, or because it's not all that long, we can stop at the end of each slide and you can ask questions also. I like to do 3 survey questions to get a feel for my audience, so I know what I can breeze over and what I can go further into depth. So let's do this the simple way. Instead of going through chat, if you can unmute yourselves, and we will go down the list of attendees to get your answers. The first question is, what type of federal contracts are you interested in? Some of the possible answers are service contracts, construction contracts, architect engineering, IT, ship repair, so on and so forth. All right, so let's go down the list. Dr. Shandora.
Good morning. I am interested in service contracts.
Okay. And Kevin Hudson.
We're a lighting supplier, but also a general contractor, so construction or construction supplies.
And supplies. Okay, that's good. Supply. Okay. John Palata.
Construction contracts.
Okay. Zan. Zan.
Machining and metalworking contracts or manufacturing.
Manufacturing. Okay. Shauna.
A service. We're a storage facility and moving company.
Okay. Service contracts. Absolutely right. Okay. And Purvis.
Hey, good morning. I am from Mississippi and I just enjoy listening to your knowledge. So I'm here as a visitor.
Are you a PTAC counselor?
I'm a PTAC. I'm a PTAC. I come in
Excellent.
whenever I see you presenting, I try to listen in.
Oh, very good. We're going to have a brand new 2-day workshop next month on solicitation review. So you might be interested in that, as well as everybody that's attending a class today. I'm working, developing right now. It's going to turn out to be fabulous. Okay. Leslie, I know. Did I catch? Is there anybody that I didn't get? Kimberly.
So I'm assuming I'm service. I'm brand new because I just got my OMB certification. I produce voiceovers, so it'd be video production, audio. Is that service?
Yeah, that would fall into services. Okay, very good. Anybody else? Did I miss anybody else?
Jennifer
Yeah.
Blood. I'm
Hey,
sorry, talking over somebody, but Jennifer Blood, I'm in engineering.
Jennifer, I'm looking at the list here. Jennifer, engineering, architect engineering. Okay, we got an engineer on board. Somebody else also?
yes, Terry, Mark Schaefer with a Glow. We do logistics consulting, like global logistics brokering. So I guess a service in that regard.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking too. Services. Okay, anybody else?
Ben Lusky, Taylor Pro, construction.
Construction. Okay. All right. So we've got 4 in services, 3 in construction, 1 in manufacturing, 1 in supply, and 1 architect engineering. Okay, so no IT, no ship repair. All right. The second of my 3 questions, we'll go through the list of people again to get your response. Have you had or currently have a federal contract as a prime contractor or a subcontractor? Start from the top with, let's go with Kimberly.
Nope, brand new.
Okay. Benjamin.
Brand new.
Okay. Mark.
Yeah, so I have one with the U.S. Coast Guard. It's just ending the base year. So option year 1 starts today.
Excellent.
So I'm waiting to see how that plays out to make sure that it's still good.
A year of experience in federal contracting. All right. You might have some stories for us to share.
Thanks.
Let's see, Jennifer.
I've worked with federal contracts, but only in the capacity of representing a city or a county.
Okay, no federal then.
Well, not directly with the federal. I've worked with federal aid, federal projects, but only in the capacity of representing a county. If that makes sense.
Okay. Kim.
I didn't get to introduce. I'm not a business owner. I'm with Department of Enterprise Services, wanting to learn about your presentation, and so I have no experience with federal contract.
Okay. Did we do Kevin?
We've never done any federal contracting. We're new to this space.
Okay. Dr. Shandora.
No experience.
Okay. John.
Yeah, we have previous state talks. One just expired.
State, did you say?
We have multiple MATOCs with GSA, BPA. We've got BLM, MATOC. We also, one of our state talks just expired for YTC. We've also held federal jocks. As of right now, we still hold the USPS jock for.
Okay, so how many years of federal contracting experience as a prime or a sub combined?
I'd say Saber's got close to 2 decades.
Oh, excellent. Okay, you probably got lots of horror stories then. Okay.
Good ones though. Good stories.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Where are we at? I've lost track here. Okay, pipe up. Who hasn't responded yet? And Purse? Everybody?
Hey there. I'm the PTAC, so I'm just listening
Okay.
in. Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else I miss? Zan?
You missed. Yeah, I'm new to it as well. I've worked at companies previously that we've done federal contracts, but with my own company. Now this is first round.
Okay, very good. Anybody else I miss?
Hi, this is Shauna. I'm going to say no. We work with the US Transcom on military moving, and we used to do local contracting for local moves here in the town, but that's about it.
So with Transcon, were you the prime contractor with some federal agency or a subcontractor?
So the way it works now, we're a subcontractor now under the current DP3 program.
With which agency?
So it's really with US Transcom, but it's a whole different, you don't fill out the big contract and the rate solicitation. Everybody files rates once a year, and it's managed by transportation service providers now.
They are the prime contractors and you're a
Yes.
subcontractor to them?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll put you down as yes, having experience on federal contract then.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else I miss? Okay, last question. So the two questions I just did, I've had in my previous classes, but this next one is going to be a brand new one. And that's because I've got a slide in this presentation that is dedicated to the Department of Defense. So the question is, are you interested in Department of Defense contracts? So remember, there are multiple sub-agencies in the Department of Defense. You have the Defense Logistics Agency, which buys a lot of supplies through DIBS. There's the Defense Health Services. Then you got the military agencies. You got the Marine Corps, Air Force, Army, Navy. So there's lots of sub-agencies within the Department of Defense. If you're interested in contracting with any of those sub agencies, then your answer is yes. And this is important for the slide that's going to be coming up. So let's go through the order again. We'll start from the top with Kimberly.
Yes, because any sort of training, advertising, any of that would include any sort of voice. So yes.
Okay. Benjamin.
Yes, absolutely. There's a number of military installments in our area.
Okay. Mark.
Yes.
The answer is yes. Okay, I figured that one. Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, specifically Joint Base Lewis McChord
Right.
up here in the area. We've started meeting with the National Security Innovation Network and also the Pacific Northwest Defense Council. So we're very interested in pursuing stuff in that arena.
Okay, so we got all right. John.
Yes.
Okay. Zan.
Yes.
Yes, I figured that would be your answer. And Puris is not applicable. And Jennifer?
No.
No, not interested in DoD. Okay, Kim?
Sorry, I like to learn.
Oh, absolutely, we'll do it. Okay, so the preponderance of the class is interested in Department of Defense. All right, so we'll spend some time on that slide. All right, as I said before, we'll do interruptions during the class for any questions, or you can jot down your questions on your PowerPoint there and we'll come back to them. We'll have lots of time at the end to answer hopefully everybody's questions and all the questions. Any questions before we get started? Okay, let's get started. Are you ready for a government contract? Here's a little trivia question you can ask your coworkers. You see the G there is underlined. It's a capital G. There's a difference between capital G government and lowercase g government. By chance, anybody know the answer? This is a little trivia. We're off track a little bit. Okay, so I learned this early in my career from my supervisor. And in writing business clearances, we used capital G government. Capital G government is federal government. All other governments are lowercase g. That's state, county, city, so on and so forth. So a little trivia there. All right, steps in chronological sequence. All right, so across there we have registration. If you don't register for a federal contract, you cannot be awarded a federal contract. So we'll be getting into that. Once you're registered, you can start looking for solicitations. And then you want to do a solicitation review to make that go, no-go decision. Then it's, if you make the go decision that you're going to compete for the award of the contract, you're going to do your proposal preparation and submission, submitting in accordance with the solicitation. The solicitation says how to submit your proposal. Very important to follow that. Next two is the agency contracting officer. They're going to evaluate proposals, and then they're going to make the award. So there's a couple of steps, important steps after the steps leading up to award of a contract. The next one is a debrief. Whether you win or lose the award of the contract, always ask for a debrief. And the reason for that we'll get into, but quickly, you can learn how the agency evaluated your proposal. Not the other competitors' proposals, but your proposal. And that is invaluable for you preparing your next proposal for award of a contract. And the last step there is you're working to get a satisfactory or better performance evaluation, because that evaluation will be visible to all federal agencies for 5 years. So you want to do well, you want to get at least a satisfactory. So it's all about customer service after award of a contract. Okay, now you'll see that I've highlighted 2 of those steps in red. I've identified those because they are common points of failure. In my 29 years as a contracting officer, I saw on a recurring basis contractors who submitted non-responsive proposals. So there's 2 concepts about proposals. One is being responsive, which is on the contractor's part, and the other is responsibility, which is on the contracting officer's part. An example of being non-responsive, typically in a large procurement, there's 3 parts to a proposal. There's a cover letter, your price proposal, and a technical proposal. So the example that I give regularly is the cover letter. The solicitation will say to submit the following 10 items in your cover letter. And if you only submitted 9, you're non-responsive. So typically the contracting officers, especially if there's competition, they got a number of proposals, they will do a quick brief review of each of the proposals just to check responsiveness. And if any of them are non-responsive, they get set aside and they may not even get evaluated. So that is a common point of failure, is contractors not following the instructions in the solicitation. You've got to be responsive first. Get your foot in the door. And last is after award, working for the performance evaluation. It's just like private industry. When you get a contract, it's all about customer satisfaction. You are working to please that federal agency in providing the service or the supplies, the consulting, whatever, on time and quality. So all of that gets evaluated, and you're striving to get at least a satisfactory. Have those communication lines open with the contracting officer and the representatives. You're a team member on that contract. There's the contracts office, there's the end user, there's you, the contractor, there's your subcontractors. You're all working together as a team to fulfill the requirement. And one of my slides will talk about dollar thresholds for the various types of contracts, whether it's services, construction, ship repair, whatnot. There is a dollar threshold for which a performance evaluation must be executed by the contracting officer. And if it's less than that, they don't have to do a performance evaluation. Any questions on this slide before we move? Okay. First things first, in order to be eligible for a federal contract, you're going to need to have your state business license. You're going to have your taxpayer identification number, or EIN. You're going to need to find your NAICS codes. North American Industrial Classification System. It's a 6-digit number for the industry that you are in, whether you are a service contractor, a supply provider, a manufacturer, ship repair, IT, or whatnot. There are I think it's 749 different NAICS codes. You're going to need to identify your primary NAICS code. You can have many NAICS codes, but all the rest of them are secondary NAICS codes. And then you're going to need to determine whether you are a small or large business in each one of those NAICS codes. So at the bottom of this slide, I provided the 2 websites. The first one is to look up your NAICS code. So you start, because you don't know if, and most of you are all new to federal contracting, and it's the federal government uses NAICS codes. And for the most part, states do not use them. There's a few exceptions, and city and county governments don't use NAICS codes. NAICS codes are a great way of identifying the industry that you're in and competing for the award of contracts. So the first website down there is to find your NAICS codes, whether it's 1 or it's 10. And you'll do it by putting in keywords for your business, for keywords for your industry, and then up will pop the NAICS code. Read the definition. If you do any part of that definition, then you can probably use that NAICS code. And you may have multiple NAICS codes, like in construction, there are many NAICS codes, and you may have more than one of those NAICS codes because you do more than one of those industry segments. So the next website there is where you will go. Once you determine what your NAICS code is, you'll go to this next website, you'll enter the NAICS code, and it will tell you the business size standard. So depending on which industry you're in, there are 2 different types of business sizes. One is by the number of employees, which is for manufacturing and research and development companies. And that recently changed this year. So it's number of employees averaged over 2 years. It used to be 1 year, the most recent year, how many employees. Small Business Administration has changed that. Now it's an average over 2 years. I think what led to that was the pandemic, companies getting smaller and whatnot. The other size standard is based on dollars of revenue averaged over a 5-year period. So this just changed this year also in January. It used to be an average over 3 years. It is now an average over 5 years. So more companies can go back to being a small business instead of maturing and being considered a large business. So that second website then will determine whether you're a small or large business in each of the NAICS codes that you've identified. You need this information because when you actually go into SAM to register your company, it's going to ask you for your NAICS codes, and then you're going to have to identify for each one of those codes whether you're small or large. Any questions on this slide? Okay, move on. Now we're into registration. You've gotten all that information that we've talked about already in the first slides. SAM registration. SAM is System for Award Management. In that website, there are many things, but once you get into the main page in sam.gov, which is the website at the bottom there, sam.gov, in the right-hand side of that first screen is where you register your company. SAM is going to provide you an MPIN number. You want to record that and safeguard it. Do not ignore it. A year and a half ago, when this first came about, the assignment of MPINs, people were ignoring it. And then when they wanted to go back into SAM, SAM would ask for the MPIN number, and they didn't know it because they ignored it when they first got it. And if you don't have it, you don't get in. So it is one of the 3 numbers, and we'll talk about this later in the summary, is that you want to record it and safeguard it because you're going to be using it over and over and over again. Okay. Then you're going to be entering your NAICS codes. You're going to identify your business size. Then there'll be a screen on socioeconomic certifications. For the federal government, the 5 main socioeconomic certifications are small business, woman-owned small business, veteran-owned small business, hub zone small business, and the Small Business Administration 8A program, which is a 9-year program. So if you're been certified or you're pursuing getting certified and you get certified, you'll want to go back into SAM and check the box that, yes, I am certified in that socioeconomic category. Another screen you'll get to is representations and certifications. This is where there's lots of clauses that you have to go through and answer all the questions in those clauses. One of them, for one paragraph, for example, is, are you a woman-owned small business? You mark yes or no. Are you a veteran-owned small business? You mark yes or no, so on and so forth. There are lots of questions that you have to answer. It takes time. So don't think that when you get into sam.gov that you can do this in an hour. It's more like half a day. You're going to identify your points of contact within your company. You're going to provide your banking information. Some people get leery about this. I got to provide my routing number and my name of my financial institution and whatnot. That's scary. The reason for this is your SAM registration is for 2 things. One is to be awarded a contract. If you're not in SAM, you cannot be awarded a federal contract. You can be a subcontractor. You don't need to be registered in SAM to be a subcontractor, but you do need to be registered in SAM to get a federal contract. The other reason why you have to have your SAM registration current and active is if you have a federal contract as a prime contractor, that's how you get paid. When you submit an invoice, the federal agency's paying office is going to go to SAM to find your banking information so they can do electronic funds transfer to pay you. So never let your SAM registration expire. We'll talk about that's the last bullet there. Your SAM registration is good for 12 months. You have to renew it every 12 months. If you have a federal contract, do not let your SAM registration lapse. Otherwise, you won't get paid. Okay. And SAM will assign you a UEI and a cage code. A UEI is a unique entity identifier. It's 12 digits long. A cage code is the commercial and government entity code, which is 5 digits long. It's alphanumeric. You will know that you are successfully registered in SAM in about 6 to 10 days after you hit the enter button, send your information in. You will then get an email with your cage code. So I've talked to some companies in the past and said, yep, I did my SAM registration. I sent it off, and I'd ask, and you got a cage code? What's that? You don't have a cage code? No, you're not registered in SAM then. Okay, so you fill out go through all these screens, you hit enter, send it off, and 6 to 10 days later, if everything is lined up with the moon, star, and the sun, you will get an email with your 5-character alphanumeric cage code. Then you know that you are registered in SAM. And that is another of the 3 numbers that you need to record and safeguard, because communicating with the federal agencies, they're going to want to know your cage code. They are now going to want to know your UEI also. UEI has replaced Dun & Bradstreet's DUNS number. DUNS number went away as of April 4th of this year. It is now UEI. Dun & Bradstreet was a 9-digit number. UEI is a 12-digit number. So when you register, SAM will assign you a UEI. Any questions on this slide? A lot of information there. Okay, moving on. Now we're going to spend a few slides here talking about certifications. Throughout this PowerPoint presentation, you'll see a red asterisk at the end of a term. And what that represents is we have another class just on that subject, in this case, certifications. whole class dedicated to certifications. So this is a little brief information about certifications in this class of steps leading to a federal contract. So the first category is small business. We've been talking about this a little bit, and you can self-certify that you're a small business in accordance with your NAICS and the Small Business Administration size standard that we talked about on a previous slide. Once again, it's a self-certification. You don't need to apply to the Small Business Administration to get a certification as a small business. You are self-certifying because of your NAICS that you identified, and you went to that other website and look up your size standard, and you were less than the number of employees or the millions of dollars average over 5 years. You were less than that amount. So then you are a small business. So in SAM, you get to the page of certifications, you can mark the box small business, and that is a self-certification. Okay. The next category is veteran-owned small business. That is a self-certification also. There's a subcategory to veteran-owned small business, and that is service-disabled veteran-owned small business. So to find the criteria for the certification, you go to va.gov, veteransadministration.gov. I provided the website there for you at the bottom of the page. You'll see the criteria in there, and if you meet the criteria, then when you register in SAM, you can just check the box because it is, as I've identified there, a self-certification. The SBA, the VA don't need to give you a certification. Here's a little bit of advice though. For some of you who are veterans, I would highly recommend that you get a VA, Veterans Administration, veteran-owned small business certification from them. And I'm going to tell you why. So in the past, there were 2 agencies that were certifying veterans for small business: the Veterans Administration and the Small Business Administration. Congress, about 2 years ago, made the determination that there should be only one agency that should be issuing these certifications. And they determined that it's going to be the Small Business Administration. The VA was doing a great job. They were doing it quickly, but Congress decided the Small Business Administration should be doing it. The SBA will be taking over that certification process starting January 1st, 2023. I have it there on the screen for you. But until then, if you are a veteran, you probably should be going to va.gov and submitting an application to get a certification as a veteran-owned small business, or if you are service disabled, a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. The reason for that is come January 1st of next year, if you don't have the VA certification, you will have to submit an application to the Small Business Administration to get an official certification, formal certification that you are either a veteran-owned small business or a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Now, the reason for getting the VA's Veteran Administration certification now is because come January 1st, 2023, the Small Business Administration will honor those certifications given out by the Veterans Administration for 1 year. So if you don't have it, then there's going to be lots of competition for applications being sent into the Small Business Administration. It's going to take some time to get that certification. So my recommendation for you, if you're a veteran or a service disabled veteran, go to the Veterans Administration.gov website provided to you there and apply for a certification. Then it won't be so stressful come January 2023 because your certification from the VA will be honored by the Small Business Administration for a year. Okay. Any questions on small business or veteran-owned small business certifications? Question? Mark? No? Hand up?
Hey, yes, just really quick. So you're saying honoring it for a year. My understanding is that if you're already certified as service disabled veteran owned small business, that your verification just, it rolls over. I mean, ultimately every year we have to, recertify or whatnot, but it's not that same, reapplication process.
And you said certified by who?
It's been certified by the VA.
Right. So that's what I was talking about. You got your official certification from the Veterans Administration that you are either a veteran-owned small business or a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Come January 1st, the Small Business Administration will honor those certifications from the Veterans Administration for 1 year. After that, say January 1st, 2024, you're going to have to be submitting an application to the Small Business Administration, no longer the Veterans Administration, because they're going to be out of the picture.
For the recertification. Okay, got it. Yeah, exactly. Same. Understood.
Excellent question. Anybody else? Okay, so we're going to move on to some more certifications. All right, so here's the next two that are related: women-owned small business, and a subset is economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. So this can either be a self-certifying certification or go through a formal process. So let's talk about this. You can, when you register in SAM and you get to the page of socioeconomic certifications, two of them will be women-owned small business and the other is economically women-owned small business, economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. If you don't go through the formal application process to get a certification from the SBA, then you can self-certify that you're a woman-owned small business. Now, the reason, and really the only reason that I can think of that you would want to get a formal certification from the SBA that you are a woman-owned small business or an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business is if your any of your NAICS codes, and I've identified here that there's 759 NAICS codes. The Small Business Administration has identified 646 of those 759 for agencies to set aside solicitations for women-owned small businesses. So here's the thought process. On our previous slides, we talked about you got to go find your NAICS codes. Once you found your one NAICS code or many NAICS codes for your company, you'll want to go to the list of NAICS codes and see if any of those are the 646 that have been determined by the SBA for potential set aside for procurements for women-owned small business or economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. If your NAICS codes are not on that list of 646, there's no reason for you to submit an application and get a certification as a woman-owned small business, because the agencies are not going to be doing set-asides for women-owned small business if it's not one of the 646 NAICS codes. Okay. So the federal agencies, if you are self-certifying as a woman-owned small business and they award you a contract, they get credit for awarding a contract to a woman-owned small business. So it only works for the federal agency. It doesn't help you unless your NAICS code is one of the 646. And then you want to go through the formal process of getting a certification by the Small Business Administration. Okay. Now, the other subcategory is economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. And of the 646 NAICS codes, 113 of them have been designated for economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. So you want to check that list also. You know your NAICS codes. You're going to check the list to see if your NAICS code is one of the 113. If it is not, then there's no reason to submit an application to get a certification for EDWOSB. If it is one of those, then submit your application to the SBA to get a certification as EDWOSB. A recurring question that I get from my clients is, if I'm a woman-owned small business and I'm economically disadvantaged, do I need to apply for both? The answer is no, because EDWSB is a subset of WOSB. So you can compete for set-asides for women-owned small business or economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses. Okay. To get the information about this certification for women-owned, there is the website for you, certify.sba.gov. And what pops up there are 3 socioeconomic certifications. One is woman-owned, the other is Hub Zone, and the other is the Small Business Administration 8A program. We'll be talking about next on the next slide. Any questions on women-owned small business?
I have a question.
Yes.
How is SBA different than, say, OMB certification that I got? Is this another thing that I have to get, or does OMB cover that?
No, OMB is state, is it not? It's a state
Correct.
certification. Correct. All right. So that's an important subject that I haven't talked about yet.
Okay.
Your state socioeconomic certifications, like the one you just mentioned, are not accepted. There's no reciprocity between state and federal. The feds do not recognize state certifications, and the states do not recognize federal certifications. So if you're interested in state contracts and federal contracts, and you're a woman-owned small business, which you are, you need to go through the certification process to each of them.
Gotcha.
Okay, so you've got your state certification now, and if you want to pursue federal contracts, you're going to go to certify.sba.gov, look at the criteria for a federal certification as a woman-owned small business, and if you meet that criteria, then still online, submit your application to the Small Business Administration, and some months later, if everything lines up under the stars, you'll get your certification. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That is a common recurring question. I got my certification from the state. Am I good? No, they don't acknowledge, accept each other.
It's such a long process. Can't one just cover everything?
Yeah, you would hope so. Okay, but the good news on this, though, is much of the documents that you submitted for the state certification, you'll be using for your federal certification. Much of the documents are the same. Okay, so when you go through any of these certifications, and we got like 3 or 4 pages of them, you want to probably keep all those documents that you've had to upload when you apply for certification. Keep them in a central location, because you're probably going to be able to use many of those for each of the certifications again. So have a collection of them someplace on your computer. Right. Great questions. Any other questions on women-owned small businesses? Okay, moving on to the next 2 and last 2.
Hey, Terry, I think that OMWBE state certification, they also take application for federal certification. So you can do 2 things in one agency.
Yeah, that website is misleading. We've had this conversation amongst our PTAC counselors for a number of months now. And the one site, that's the state site, a lot of the documentation is the same for the federal, but getting your state, the feds do not recognize it. You've got to go and apply if you're interested in state government contracts and federal agency contracts. You need to submit an application to the Small Business Administration for the woman-owned small business certification. And if you're interested in, like the state of Washington, you got to go through the state website and submit an application. The information that's on the state's website is misleading. We've had this conversation many times amongst us PTAC counselors.
Terry?
Yep.
Just to clarify, the only time that the state certifications work for federal is for DOT and FAA.
Right. Right. Department of Transportation. So if the state gets funds from the federal government for Department of Transportation project, then the federal certification applies. And that may apply to a number of state government solicitations when they get partially funded or fully funded by a federal agency. Those solicitations that the state issues will have a lot of requirements from the federal government because the feds are partially or fully funding that contract. And so the state has to include a lot of federal requirements in the solicitation and the follow-on contract because the feds are funding it. Okay, good point. Any other? All right, so we're on the next slide. This is the last slide, the last two certifications. One is Hub Zone, historically underutilized business zone certification, and the Small Business Administration 8A program. Hub zones. This is a formal process to get this certification from the SBA. Hub zones. So the Small Business Administration has a website, and it is the, which one is it there? I've got two websites. The second one, maps. So when you go to that website, a map of the United States comes up. This is a great website to help you determine if you're in a hub zone, historically underutilized business zone. A map of the United States comes up, and you can zoom into your location where your company headquarters is located and see if you are in any of the shaded areas, which indicates that you're in a hub zone. The other thing you can do on this very same screen on this website is in the upper left-hand corner, put in your address. And in the upper right-hand corner, it will say whether you are or are not in a hub zone. I think it's a wonderful website. Now, the Small Business Administration map is typically good for 10 years, and it's based, most of the hub zones are based on the 10-year census. So we all know we went through a census that ended December of last year, 2020. Yeah, time is escaping. And then typically 12 months later, the hub zones change as a result of the 10-year census. The boundaries can morph, the boundaries can shape, they get smaller, they can get larger, they can disappear entirely. The hub zones can disappear. New hub zones in the United States could appear. So that happens every 10 years. So the SBA has currently frozen that map until into June 30th of 2023. Not sure why. So if you meet the criteria, and that would be the first website there, for being in the hub zone, there's a couple of main criteria. 51% or more of your business is owned by a US citizen. At least 35% of your employees live in a hub zone. It doesn't have to be your hub zone. They can live in any other hub zone, at least 35% of the employees. Your business is located in a hub zone, and a few other things too, dollar thresholds and whatnot. So if you meet the criteria as provided on that website, then go ahead and submit an application to get that certification as a hub zone small business. Many advantages to getting these certifications, and that's all covered in the other class on socioeconomic certifications. Okay, next and last certification is the Small Business Administration's 8A program. That is for socially and not or and economically disadvantaged individuals or entities. And is very important. It's not one or the other. You have to meet both criteria, socially and economically disadvantaged, in order to get accepted into the program. It is a 9-year program. And it is a certification, and you're assigned a number by the SBA as being an 8A contractor. The website I've provided there for you to learn more information about the 8A program. So there are $3 thresholds that you have to be below. Ownership is 51% or more by US citizen. The You have to prove that you're socially and economically disadvantaged. It's a great program to get in. A lot of benefits that I go into in the class just on socioeconomic certifications. Okay, any questions on either of these certifications?
Hey, Terry, really quick on the hub zone. If you go through and you meet the criteria, if you're seeking a contract that has a hub zone, is it specific to that state? So say if we're certified hub zone Washington State, and this is a federal contract, is it okay, your hub zone and you're in the running for it? You know, that adds to when you do your, you know, they look at their credits that they get. Oh, we selected somebody in a hub zone. It counts, or it's specific to the state utilizations?
Nothing to do with state. So the federal government, when they do their market research to find small businesses that can fulfill the requirement, typically they do a combination of 3 different sources. One is they can go into SAM and do a search to find companies. Another is they'll go to the SBA website called Dynamic Small Business Search database and find companies that can fulfill the requirement. And another method is called a notice, sources sought. It is a posting on sam.gov under contract opportunities. Contract opportunities is for where you find the solicitations and the sources sought. There are a number of notices, we call them notices, in contract opportunities. Some of them are draft statements of work, sources sought, pre-solicitation notice, the solicitation itself, the award notice, and there are other notices also. So the one that you want to pay attention to is the sources sought. That's where the federal agency's contracting officer is looking for small businesses to fulfill the requirement. So if you get enough responses for companies like maybe yours, where you have your certification as a hub zone small business, and the contracting officer, when I was contracting officer, I would like to get at least 3, but the federal acquisition regulation only requires 2. It's hard to determine a fair and reasonable price when you've only got 2 data points. And that's why I like to get 3. It gives me an idea if I got a fair and reasonable price. So I always try to get 3 or more. So as a result of my sources sought, I got 4 responses from hub zone small businesses, and they all look like they have the capacity and capability and the interest in fulfilling my requirement as a contracting officer from a federal agency. What then I can do is fill out my form that ends up going to the Small Business Administration that says, I've done my market research on dynamic small business search in the SBA's database, and I went into SAM and I did my search, and I posted a sources sought notice in sam.gov under contract opportunities, and attached to this request, I have provided my market research, and I found 4 hub zone small businesses that can fulfill my requirement. Goes to the SBA, SBA looks it over, and they think, oh, that's fine, approved. Send it back to the contracting officer, issues a solicitation. It is now set aside for only companies that are certified hub zone small businesses. It doesn't matter where you're located, whether you're in Florida or Washington or Arizona, you are a hub zone small business. You can compete for the award of this contract. Did I answer your question?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Great question. Anybody else? SBA 8A or hub zones? Or any of the other certifications on the previous 2 pages? These are the 3 pages on certifications. Okay, we are moving along. Capability statements. As a number of you are probably fairly new, you probably don't know what a capability statement is. Capability statement is your company's marketing tool. This is a 1 sheet of paper, both sides, in color that tells the federal agencies, when you communicate with the federal agency, the small business liaison officer, the small business representative for that agency. That's who you're communicating with. You know, so many companies over the last 3.5 years that I've been doing this talk about, how do I get a hold of the contracting officer so they know about me? Or how do I get a hold of the end user, the project manager, you know, the people who have the requirements? That's not who you want to contact. You want to contact the agency's small business specialist. They are your advocate. They are the go-between. The small business specialist for the agency sees every requirement that the agency has, and they have to review it and approve it or disapprove it and send. If they disapprove, they send it back to the contracting officer, say, do a better job of your market research to find small businesses. If they approve it, then they send it on to the Small Business Administration. They review it and they can disapprove it or approve it. And if they approve it, it goes back to the contracting officer, and then they can do their solicitation and make award. So it's the capability statement that you are giving to the agency's small business specialist. So this is your market research. This is your marketing tool to the agencies. You want to have a capability statement. One sheet of paper, both sides, do it in color. And what information you have on that is your capabilities, your socioeconomic certifications, your experience, whether it's federal contracts as a prime contractor or a subcontractor, any state government contracts, counties, cities, school districts, universities, or the private industry. It's your experience. And then your contact information. You know, your phone number, your name, your address, your website, your email address, your contact information. All this is on the front side of the capability statement. On the back side is details of your experience that you've identified on the front side. We have a template for this. If you're interested, we can send it to you. Also a 14 or 15 page guide of the do's and don'ts in making a capability statement. It is a living document. Just as your certifications and experience changes, your capability statement is going to change. So the previous 3 slides, we talked about socioeconomic certifications. It's a process to submit your application to the Small Business Administration to get a certification. It can take months to get those. In the meantime, though, you have registered in SAM. You have possibly self-certified as a small business, possibly as a woman-owned small business. And you're creating your capability statement. And in the upper left-hand corner of your capability statement is you're identifying your small business certification. So you're gonna list small business, woman-owned small business. And some months later, the SBA comes through and says, okay, here's your certification for Hub Zone. We've approved your application for being a Hub Zone small business. So now you're going back to your capability statement and you're updating it and you're adding under small business certifications now, Hub Zone small business. You are also now going back into sam.gov, updating your profile and getting to the screen of socioeconomic certifications and checking the box for Hub Zone small business. See, so these are living documents. Your SAM registration constantly changing, and your capability statement, you're constantly updating it. As soon as you win a contract, either a federal contract, either as a prime contractor, or you are a subcontractor to a prime contractor, you want to go and update your capability statement, because now you can add to the bottom right-hand corner your experience. You are now a prime contractor or a subcontractor on a federal contract, and you're going to provide that information. So living documents. For a number of you, you're talking about wanting to get contracts not only from the federal government, but state government and possibly county or city, school districts, universities, whatever. You will need more than one capability statement. The reason for that is the information that you put on a capability statement for the federal government is different than the information that you put on a capability statement for example, the state of Washington. Remember earlier we talked about NAICS codes. NAICS codes is a federal system. The states, for the most part, do not know what a NAICS code is. So you're not going to put NAICS codes on a capability statement for the state of Washington. You're only going to be putting it on your capability statement for the federal government agencies. Okay, so there's one difference. Another difference is in the bottom right-hand corner where you're identifying experience is on the capability statement for the federal government. You're going to start with your experience with federal agencies, whether it is as a prime contractor or a state or a subcontractor. And then you're going to list state, then county, then city, and so on and so forth. On your capability statement for the state, under the experience block, you're going to start with state because the state wants to know, do you have experience working with us? So you're going to do state and then maybe federal and county and city and so on and so forth. So those are two great examples why you need two different capability statements if you're going after contracts from the state and the federal government. Last bullet there, I already mentioned, we have a template for a capability statement for federal agencies and a 15 page guide of do's and don'ts of putting a capability statement together. If you want that, send an email to Kathy Kokis, our local director, and we will send that to you electronically. Any questions on capability statements?
Hey, Terry, I just have a quick one because I had heard about having the multiple capability statements. Really great for you to highlight that. And then I guess ultimately as we go forward, then we'll have more details for that backside. I haven't really made a backside just yet. But I had heard, you know, as we send those to agencies and to OSDBUs and to different business development folks, then they may ask for a capability briefing. Can you just really quick, like maybe 3 or 4 nuggets of things that would be into that briefing? Because I have some folks that I may need to give a briefing to in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so in my experience as a contracting officer for 29 years, there have been occasions where my agency's small business liaison officer is the go-between between you, the contractor, and the agency's contracting officer. And they are the ones that set up a meeting for you, the contractor, to give a brief to the contracting officer. And the reason typically why that happens is the small business specialist is aware of all the requirements that are going to be coming to the small business specialist for the agency, regardless of dollar size. Not micro purchases, but large procurements, say over $25,000 each. And so the small business specialist for the agency knows of this requirement that's coming, and there's going to be some difficulty in finding companies to fulfill the requirement. And you have provided a capability statement to the small business specialist that appears that your company can fulfill this requirement that's coming through the pipeline. And so the small business specialist has had a meeting with the contracting officer. The contracting officer is very interested in finding some small businesses because this appears to be going to be hard to fulfill and compete. And he may entertain having a face-to-face briefing, or maybe Zoom because of pandemic, between the two parties, the contractor, you, the contractor, and he, the agency's contracting officer. So in that brief, number of topics will come up. One is capability. Does your company have the capability of fulfilling this requirement? So they're going to talk about the requirement. What's, a brief synopsis of the statement of work, what it is that the government is looking for. Do you have the capability of fulfilling that? Do you have the capacity of fulfilling that? You have enough resources, employees, technology, equipment, so on and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with not having everything that's needed to fulfill the requirement, because we call it subcontracting. The portions of work that either you don't want to go out and get for your own company, you can subcontract out that portion to a subcontractor, or a subcontractor to that subcontractor, or multiple subcontractors. So in that discussion between the contractor and the contracting officer, they can talk about the scope of work. Do you have the capability? Do you have the capacity? Do you have the interest? So on and so forth. And you got this opportunity now to market your company to the agency's contracting officer. So, not only is it public relations, but you're giving the brief about the company. You might even get into what your experience is. Have you done anything like this in size, scope, and complexity? That's a common terminology that we contracting officers use. Size, scope, and complexity. So the conversation will be talking about that too. What is your experience have you done this before? Doesn't have to be with a federal agency. It could be with the state or a county or a city, private industry. They want to know and get a comfort level of your experience in doing this type of work, either as a prime contractor or even as a subcontractor. It's at this point, it's all about risk. It's a risk assessment. So the contracting officer wants to feel comfortable that your company has the capability, capacity, and interest to do this. And it's the risk meter. The risk meter can be high, and the contracting officer is apprehensive of awarding a contract to you. If you have experience from anywhere recent in size, scope, and complexity, the risk meter comes down. The government agency is feeling more comfortable with awarding a contract to you. So typically, it has a lot to do with risk. So those are the types of things that we'll be talking about in a brief. Any follow-on questions on that?
Thank you.
Was that helpful?
Yes, no, perfect. Those three items, and then how to get after it, just to kind of, I guess vignettes are always helpful. And then what you've said on risk, I've heard before, and that apprehension, trying to get them past that, that middle area to kind of move the meter towards a feeling comfortable is awesome. Thank you. That's perfect.
Yeah, you're welcome. So that's why it's so important on your capability statement. On the front side, you're identifying experience. That has to do with risk also. So on your capability statement for a federal agency, there's a pecking order of how do you identify your experience. Federal first, whether it's prime contractor or as a subcontractor, then state, then county, then city, school districts, universities, private industry. That's the pecking order. And that is lowering risk. So when a contracting officer sees your capability statement, they are going to be looking at your experience. And if you've got federal experience, the risk meter is going down. Oh, you've had a contract with the Department of Energy, or you've had a contract with the Department of the Navy. Excellent. Oh, so one of them was the prime contractor, but the rest of them were subcontractors. Okay. So you know how to prepare a proposal for a contract modification. You know how to submit an invoice to get paid. You know how to get, or you've had employees get badges to get on the installation. The risk meter is coming down. You have experience. Okay. It's all the comfort level. It's risk. Okay. All right. Any other questions on that? Okay. Now we're going to get to my third question that I asked about Department of Defense interest. And there's a lot of interest here on Department of Defense contracts. So we're talking about cybersecurity. This is a big thing that's going on now in the federal government. And in the years to come, it's going to be flowing down to state, county, and city governments. Cybersecurity. You probably have heard over the years that our federal agencies and our prime contractors and our subcontractors are getting hacked by foreign states like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. We are losing proprietary and state secrets to these foreign entities. I have, and you see a red asterisk there, I have a class on just cybersecurity and the Department of Defense's interim rule. So if you're interested in Department of Defense contracting, you've got to be knowledgeable about the cybersecurity requirements. So there's two aspects of cybersecurity that's going on right now. The Department of Defense is taking the lead. They are the first federal agency to take on cybersecurity requirements. CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, is on a 5-year rollout. It started in 2020. They are working out the kinks, the processes and procedures for identifying requirements in solicitations and what's going to be in the follow-on contract. And companies are going to have to get a certification that they meet the NIST Special Publication 800-171A 110 controls of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not just your computer and its software, it is also physical security. Do you lock up CUI, which is controlled unclassified information? When you're done working in your office, before you go home, you secure it in a lock cabinet, for example, or a safe. You close your windows and you lock your windows. When you leave your office, you lock the door. So it's about physical security, not only your computer and who has access to your hard drive, to your electronic files, who's got the passwords, how secure are the passwords, who do you grant access to? Basic computer hygiene. So right now, cybersecurity is going through a change. The Department of Defense, since it launched this initiative in 2020, has already proposed changes as of last November. These changes can take, as I've identified there in the last bullet, 9 to 24 months to implement. Well, we're in the first step of this right now of public comment, and it's going to take some time. So this just started. They posted these proposed changes. This is past November. So it's going to take some time before they get implemented. And about a week after they proposed these changes, the Department of Homeland Security protested that they do not like the proposed changes. So in my 29 years, I've seen this process go through many times, and what was proposed didn't end up coming out at the end, 9 to 24 months later, because of all the steps that it goes through, it changes. So the main thing to take away right now is you want to start thinking about meeting the 110 controls as a basic requirement for good computer hygiene. Everybody should have on your computer at home or in your office is you got software to prevent malware, virus attacks. You change your password regularly. You got a good password. You update your software when new releases come out. It's basic computer hygiene. So everybody should be able to meet level 1 basic computer hygiene. What's more important though right now is the second group of bullets there is the Department of Defense interim rule. This went into effect December 1st of 2020, so about a year and a half ago. There are exemptions to doing a self-assessment of your cybersecurity situation. They are no CUI, COTS, and micro purchases. Okay, so what is CUI? CUI is controlled unclassified information. If you do not deal with CUI, you do not need to do a self-assessment and post your score. COTS is commercial off the shelf. If what you provide to the federal agency is commercial off the shelf items, typically in supply buys, the example that I give is the agency has a solicitation out for wanting to buy 10 laptop computers. Okay, so you are a supplier. I mean, this is something that you can get. So you go to IBM, you get a price from them, you put it in your quote, you have to make no changes to the laptop, and you're going to sell it to the federal agency, 10 laptops from IBM. That's COTS. That is commercial off the shelf. Those laptops are available to anybody. It's commercial. Now, if the agency is wanting laptops, but they need to be configured in a special way for the agency, whether it's internal hardware or software, special software or whatnot, that is no longer COTS. That is now something that you got from IBM, but your company is in the business of modifying that laptop for the use of the federal agency. That is no longer COTS. COTS has no dollar limit. You know, the agency may want 1,000 computers with speakers and the screen and the keyboards, the whole, complete workstations. It doesn't matter what the dollar value is. If it is COTS, commercially available to anybody, it could be $1 million, it could be $2 million. There's no dollar limit. If it's COTS, you're exempt. You do not need to do a self-assessment of your cybersecurity and post it to SPURS, which is in the next bullet there. And the last exemption is micro purchases. If what you are selling to the federal government is less than $10,000, that is the threshold. The dollar threshold for the micro purchases is $10,000. If what you sell to the federal government is always less than $10,000, then you don't need to do a self-assessment of your cybersecurity and post it to SPURS. So those are the three exceptions: COTS, micro purchases, and CUI. Now, if you do have CUI and deal with that, then you are going to have to do a self-assessment. So a lot of companies will ask, well, how do I know if it's CUI? Okay, good. That's a recurring question. So it is a responsibility of the federal agency to identify in the solicitation if there is any CUI. So there's two aspects of CUI: whether your company processes, stores, processes CUI, or the solicitation requires you, the contractor, to produce something that is going to be CUI, controlled unclassified information. So either one of those, then you are subject to having to do a self-assessment. Either you process CUI, or as a result of the solicitation, you're going to be creating CUI and giving the end product to the federal agency. In either case, then you're going to have to do a self-assessment in order to be awarded the contract. So the third bullet is you got to perform a self-assessment and post your score into SPURS. So you have to get an account in PIEE, and that can take anywhere from 4 hours to 2 days. Get your login and password. And then within PIEE it's a suite of applications. One of the applications is SPURS. You click on SPURS and it's going to ask you about 6 or 7 questions. You know, what is your score? When did you do your self-assessment? When do you plan to get a perfect score? Perfect score is 110. The self-assessment tool, I have one, but you can also get one on SPURS. You go up to SPURS, get the self-assessment. You go down through the questions. You start out with a perfect score of 110. For every question that you answer no, the score comes down. You can end up, if you answer all the questions no, with a negative 220 score. So you can have a score between a negative 220 and a positive 110. Whatever it is fine. Right now, the Department of Defense, with a few minor exceptions like Naval Sea Systems Command, wants their contractors to have a perfect score. Not sure why that is. But for everybody else, the Department of Defense has said they have no requirements for having to meet a certain score in order to get awarded a contract. So you do your self-assessment and say your score is 70. You go into SPURS, record your score as 70. You did it today, today's date. And the next is a date in the future when you plan to achieve a perfect score of 110, whether it's 2 months or 2 years from now. You put in a date. Then you got 2 or 3 questions about your security plan. And last question is your cage code. And if you are a division of another company, then you got to put in your parent command or your parent company's cage code also, which could be the case, but normally it's not. Okay. Your certification is good for 3 years. So let's do it. Let's talk about a scenario here. The agency, this is Department of Defense. So a sub-agency in the Department of Defense, whether it's DLA or the Navy or the Air Force, issues a solicitation, and they've identified in there, well, we know it's not COTS and it's greater than $10,000. And oh, by the way, it does have controlled unclassified information. So you got to make sure that you've done a self-assessment and posted your score up on SPURS. So you are going to compete for the award of this contract or purchase order and submit your proposal. The agency contracting officer is going to evaluate all the offers that they got or the proposals or quotes and determine that you are the successful winner of this contract. Before the agency can award the purchase order of the contract, they've got to now go into PIEE and click on SPRS, SPURS, and look up your company name. If you're not listed, you do not get the contract. Okay, so it's important to meet the requirements of the DoD interim rule. The solicitation will come out with the 2 clauses in the solicitation, which will be an indication that it is subject to the DoD interim rule. And do your self-assessment, get recorded in SPURS. And so when the contracting officer goes into SPURS, looks for your company name, they can see, well, they can see what your score is, although it's not important. All they're looking for is that your company is listed, you've done a self-assessment, therefore they can award the contract to you. So that's what cybersecurity is all about right now. I have provided the PIE website there for you to log in and get your login and password to get started to do your self-assessment and get your score recorded in SPURS. If you want to learn more about CMMC, that website has changed now. It is now, I need to update this. It is now cyberab.org. Make a note here. cyberab.org. Okay. And if you need help with getting ready for an external auditor to come in for your CMMC certification, that website will also provide companies that have been vetted and approved by the accreditation body to come in and help you get ready for an audit and get your 3-year certification. But we're not pushing it right now because we're not sure, you know, in 9 to 24 months what the CMMC requirements are going to be. But the main thing to remember right now is the DoD interim rule is in effect and has been for 1.5 years. Okay, so dealing with Department of Defense, you need to be cognizant of the cybersecurity requirements. And I have another whole class just on cybersecurity, getting into all the requirements. Any questions on cybersecurity? Okay, next. Now that you are registered in SAM, you're going to be wanting to.
Terry?
Yes, question.
Somebody did have a question on the cyber page, and I think it would be a separate class or just a one-on-one discussion. They said, do you discuss facility security clearance requirement and how to receive an FCL for a small business?
That is really not, that is not part of my class on cybersecurity, and it is not part of CMMC, and it's not part of the DoD interim rule. That is a separate process to get a facility clearance. I don't have a class on that. I don't know of a class on that. But as a contracting officer, I did have to deal with that for secure facility registered companies. It is quite a process, and typically what's required is you have to have a company that does have a facility clearance to what we want to call host you or walk you through the process as opposed to a federal agency. It is a process. It's not something that I cover. It's not something I covered on cybersecurity. But if you want some assistance on that, you can submit a request and we can set up a meeting one-on-one. Okay?
Terry,
Yes. Okay. All right. All right. So now you are registered in SAM and you are wanting to find solicitations so you can compete and be awarded for a contract. In sam.gov, where you registered your entity, over on the left-hand side are about 4, 5, 6, about 6 or 7 portals that you can click on. One of them is called Contract Opportunities. In the days, years gone by, it was known as Fed Biz Ops or FBO. That is the website where you could find solicitations. Well, the General Services Administration has brought in a number of websites, one of them being Federal Business Opportunities, into sam.gov. So you click on Contract Opportunities, and that's where you find the solicitations that have a government estimate that exceeds $25,000. So every federal agency in the executive branch is required to post their requirements that exceed $25,000 in value on contract opportunities in sam.gov. And there's the website for you, sam.gov. Now there are, what I've got listed here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different occasions when a federal agency can post a notice in contract opportunities. We talked about these briefly earlier. The first one, which doesn't happen very often, but want to make you aware of that, is an agency can post a notice for request for information, a draft request for proposal, a draft statement of work. So the last two, well, no, each one of those is different. So let's talk about the first one, a request for information. So typically when they post this notice, whether it's a draft RFP or a statement of work or an RFI, it's because it's a new requirement for the agency. They have no experience. So what they are doing is reaching out to private industry for assistance, guidance as to help the agency develop their requirement, their statement of work. So if you have that expertise in that industry, by all means, respond to it, open up a dialogue with them, help them develop the requirement. They may not know what the current latest technology is for doing what they want. That's an example. So that's the first time that an agency may, that you may find a notice in contract opportunities. Doesn't happen very often. Okay. The next one does happen often. This is the sources sought. I've underlined this. This is where the agency is looking for you. They are looking for companies to fulfill their requirement. This is a notice that you do not want to ignore, especially if you are a small business and especially if you have a socioeconomic certification. Typically, a sources sought is posted for about 10 days. There are 3 or 4 parts to a sources sought. The first one is a short synopsis of the statement of work, the requirement. The next one is, this is the information that they want you, the contractor, to submit to the contracting officer about your company. You know, what are your socioeconomic certifications, like you're a small business or you're a woman-owned small business or you're a hub zone small business. Experience, what's your experience? So they'll have a number of questions in there that they want you to provide answers to in your response to the sources sought. The next one, next bit of information in the sources sought notice is, when is it due? So typically they are only posted for about 10 days. So you want to submit a response before or no later than the cutoff date. Okay? And the reason why I have this one underlined, to me and for you, I think is the most important, is if you have any socio-economic certifications, you want to respond to this, because what you potentially can do is eliminate your competition. So as I mentioned earlier, I gave the example where the contracting officer has different market research tools. One is SAM, another one I mentioned was the Small Business Administration database called the DSBS, Dynamic Small Business Search. And the other one is this one in SAM.gov, contract opportunities, sources sought. They can post the sources sought. They are looking for small businesses to fulfill the requirement. So if the contracting officer gets the scenario that I mentioned before, 3 responses from hub zone small businesses, they can pursue setting aside the solicitation for only hub zone small businesses. Effectively, what you've done now is eliminated competition. No other companies, if they are not a hub zone certified small business, can compete for the award of the contract. That's why it is so important for you to respond to a sources sought notices to help eliminate competition. The next time a notice will come out is called a pre-solicitation notice. All this is doing is telling the public, we, the agency, are about to issue a solicitation on or about 45 days from now. You know, they may say 30 days, 45 days, whatever, but they're giving you advance notice that a solicitation is coming. That's all it is. I had a contractor a couple of months ago say, I found this pre-solicitation notice. How do I respond? Well, you don't. It's just an announcement that the agency is about to issue a solicitation. The next time is the actual solicitation. It could be an RFP, an IFP, an RFQ. RFP is request for proposal. That's for large purchases over $250,000, negotiated procurements. The next one is IFB, invitation for bid. So that is a sealed bidding procedure, comes under Federal Acquisition Regulation Part 14, where RFPs comes under Federal Acquisition Regulation Part 15. The rules and processes for each are different. And the last one is RFQ, request for quote. So this is a simplified acquisition procedure for procurements that have a value less than $250,000. So over $250,000 is RFP, under $250,000 is RFQ. Okay, so that is the actual solicitation. That is the one that you need to review the solicitation and make your no-go decision whether you're going to compete for the award of that contract. The next notice is the actual notice of award. So whether you competed for the award of the contract or you didn't, the notice for award is important if you're interested in subcontracting opportunities, because the notice of award identifies who won the contract, typically what kind of money was used to fund the contract, contact information for the successful offerer, so on and so forth. This notice is if you're interested in subcontracts, now you can contact the successful offerer and make them aware of your company, what capabilities and capacities you have to be a subcontractor. You know, I had on a number of occasions, companies say, well, isn't it too late for me to get involved with this company? The answer is no. There are a number of scenarios for subcontracting. One of them is that during the solicitation phase, when everybody was putting their proposal together, they may or may not have gotten information from subcontractors or identified who their subcontractors are. So after award, there's that opportunity to be a subcontractor. Another scenario is after award, like I just mentioned, they're looking for subcontractors, but another case is maybe they already have a relationship with a subcontractor or multiple subcontractors, or don't have a relationship, but have subcontractors lined up. During the performance of the contract, the subcontractors may drop out, or the subcontractors don't have sufficient capacity to do all of the work or do it in the time frame that it needs to be done. So additional subcontractors need to be hired to supplement the workforce. So there are many opportunities for subcontracting. Another scenario is a subcontractor goes out of business. They go bankrupt, they close their business, they sell their business or whatnot. And now the prime contractor got to find a replacement. Here you are. You've got your capability statement. You give it to them. They vet you. They issue a request for proposal from you. You submit your proposal, evaluate, negotiate, and award a subcontract to you. So there are lots of opportunities. Don't ignore a notice of award posting in contract opportunities if you're interested in subcontracting. Any questions on contract opportunities? Okay, moving on to now, I briefly mentioned the importance of a solicitation review. You can see there, I have a red asterisk. I am providing for the first time a class just on solicitation review, what to look for in a solicitation from the federal government. Also applies to state and local governments too. So I've identified a few things here for you to be cognizant of when you're reviewing a solicitation. It's so important to not skimp over the documents that are provided in a solicitation. Some of the documents that can be provided are the actual solicitation, the supporting documents like Department of Labor wage determination, government furnished property, the bid or price schedule, amendments. So typically, every solicitation ends up having to be amended. So you want to get those amendments. So there are lots of documents typically that you need to review, and you want to review them all because it can affect whether you decide whether to compete or not compete for this instance of work. So on this sheet, I've identified a few important things that you need to be mindful of the type of procurement and follow-on contract. This is just a short list of what's going to be in my class in August, on August 15th and 17th, a Monday and a Wednesday. It's an actual, not a class like this, but a workshop. So on day one, we'll go through solicitation review, you get homework, you can do an actual review of a solicitation, have a review check sheet, and answer the questions, try and find the answers to the questions. And on day 2 days later on Wednesday, we actually go through the check sheet and discuss all these bullets and more that are on the actual review check sheet. And then we make the determination of whether we're going to compete for the award of the contract or not. All right, so going down this list, set aside. All right, so you're a small business and you've got a socioeconomic certification for woman-owned small business. You want to look at the solicitation and see if it's set aside. Is it full and open competition? That is a term that we use where any company can compete for the award of this contract. That includes large business, okay? So you want to see if it's set aside. Is it set aside to small business? Oh, it is. Is it set aside to a socioeconomic group like woman-owned or hub zone or veteran-owned or SBA 8A companies, okay? Next bullet, is it a firm fixed price contract or a cost type contract or anything in between? Those are the two extremes. Firm fixed price, the risk is on you, the contractor. A cost type contract, the risk is on the government. Then there are those in between, like time and materials. There are a whole host of different contract types. They're covered in the Federal Acquisition Regulation Part 16. Next bullet, is it, so there's typically 3 different types of solicitations, and then there's also sealed bid. So there's price only, where they're only asking you for the price. There's low price technically acceptable. So that's a 2-part proposal. You're submitting a technical proposal and it gets evaluated whether it's acceptable or unacceptable. If it's determined to be acceptable, then it goes on to step 2 and the award to the lowest price. The next category is BVTO, best value trade-off. So that is where the agency is willing to pay more for a better qualified contractor. Some agencies use it. My agency, we went away from BVTO and went to LPTA because our supporting commands didn't have the money to pay more for a contractor. You know, if all they were needing is a company that can satisfactorily perform and give us the lowest price, so LPTA. Low price is very similar to sealed bid. It is just the offer with the lowest price wins the contract. Next are the labor acts. So we have what used to be called the Service Contract Act. It is now SCLSS. Congress, in its infinite wisdom, in 2017 or 18, changed the names to these acts and made them longer. I always have to look them up to get the names right. So now it is called Service Contract Labor Standards Statute. So they changed the names from an act to a statute. And I'm not sure what the difference is between an act and a statute, but they're statutes now. The next one used to be called Davis-Bacon Act. It is now Construction Wage Rate Requirements Statute. And the last one, WPCA, is still the Walsh-Healy Public Contracts Act. So that's for supplies, supply buys. The second one, CWRRS, is for construction. And the first one is for service contracts. So a number of you were interested in service contracts. So you would be wanting to know about SCLSS, Service Contract Labor Standards Statute for service contracts. That so if the value of the contract is greater than $2,500, then the agency has to include the Department of Labor's wage determination in the solicitation and the follow-on contract that states the minimum hourly wage that you must pay your employees. You can pay them more, but you cannot pay them less. And the wage determination at the end also has the fringe benefits that you have to pay the employees. So it's not one or the other. You have to pay both on a federal contract. Okay. Next important is key personnel. So a good example is construction contracts. A number of you are interested in construction contracts. The solicitation may say it requires a project manager, but only has to be part-time. It may identify a quality control manager that has to be full-time. It requires a site safety and health officer who has to be on site whenever work is being performed. So typically that's full-time. And there can be other key personnel. So those are cost drivers. Those are things that are going to cost you that need to be included in your price proposal because it's a requirement of the contract that those key personnel be employed and be available to the contracting officer. Next is capacity and capability. Do you have the capacity and the capability to perform this work? Next is certificate of cost or pricing data. So if the value of your proposal exceeds $2 million, you are probably going to be required to submit a certificate of cost or pricing data. Just be mindful of that. Next bullet, pre-proposal inquiries, cutoff date, very important. So any of the large procurements, the solicitation has the issue date of solicitation, has the date for when proposals are due, but somewhere in there is a cutoff date for when you can submit questions. Be mindful of that, because if you submit your questions after that cutoff date, the agency doesn't have to answer them. So it's important to do your solicitation review the first couple of days that it comes out. Draft your questions, get them submitted before the cutoff date to help you decide whether you're going to compete for the award of the contract or not. Be mindful of the proposal due date, any amendments that are issued, determine your potential to win the contract. Okay. cybersecurity. So if it's a DoD solicitation, be mindful of any number of contract clauses having to deal with cybersecurity. Okay, any questions on that? That is a brief overview of a solicitation review. The class in August is going to go very deep into a solicitation review. It's an actual workshop with homework. Okay, any questions on solicitation review? Okay, now we're going to get into proposal review. So as I mentioned before, typically in a large procurement, there are three components of a proposal. One is the cover letter, and another one is the price proposal. And on the next page is your technical proposal. So as I mentioned, the issue of being responsive in a cover letter, the example I gave, is the solicitation will identify what needs to be addressed in a cover letter. You want to make sure that you address each and every one of those to make sure that you are responsive. Your price proposal, have a red asterisk there also. There's another class dedicated just to preparing a price proposal. When is that coming up? Price proposal in October 12th. So in a price proposal, every solicitation will have a CLIN as a contract line item number. There'll be at least one. It's frequent there are multiple CLINs where the agency wants you to provide a price for each description of work. There could also be SLINs. It doesn't have to be, but there can be. So a SLIN is a sub-line item number. All your SLINs need to add up to the value of the CLIN. So the SLINs are subcategories of a CLIN. Your price proposal is going to have direct costs. Direct costs are your labor, materials, and equipment to actually perform the statement of work. The other component is indirect costs. Indirect costs, there are different names for it. One of them is general administrative costs, overhead, home office overhead, different names. So many times small businesses just don't know how to deal with indirect costs. The example that I give is if you put a price proposal together, you include your direct costs, you know what it's going to cost or how to determine the value of labor, materials, and equipment. Those are direct costs. And you know how much profit that you want to charge, whether it's 7%, 10%, 30%, 100% markup is your profit. The shortfall for most small businesses is the indirect cost. They don't know what it is, don't know what should be included, what should not be included. So we have a class just on overhead, G&A, how to compute it, what needs to be included, what can't be included, so on and so forth. I've helped a number of companies determine what their overhead rate is. Okay, and then the next category in a price proposal is for profit. It's also known as a fee, especially in architect engineering. Fee. So we had one party that's an engineer, architect engineering requirements. Their profit is called a fee. I call it the greed factor. How much do you want to make on this contract? Next is taxes. The reason why I put this here is because there are 8 states in the United States that levy a business and occupation tax, B&O tax. State of Washington is one of them. So you want to know what the rate is that you need to include in your price proposal so that your price includes having to pay the state of Washington the B&O tax. The other thing to be mindful of is that I think it's 49 cities within the state of Washington have also followed suit of the state and charge a B&O tax. So if you, for example, you're doing work in Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Bremerton, Washington, the Navy's shipyard, you're a contractor there doing work. Not only are you going to pay the state a B&O tax, the city of Bremerton has a B&O tax. You're going to pay the city a B&O tax too. there's a category that we not mentioned yet. So the state has B&O tax, the city has B&O tax, but there are counties within the state of Washington that levy a B&O tax. So you got 3 governments there that you got to pay a B&O tax. Include them in your price proposal because you got to pay it. The other thing is no contingencies. So the federal government does not allow a contractor to include contingencies in their price proposal. It is perfectly acceptable in private industry. Now, what we call a contingency, for example, in private industry, you add up your direct costs, indirect costs, your profit, your B&O taxes, and then you might factor in 10%, 30% of whatever for contingency. So that is if you're awarded the contract and you start performing and some issues come up that you didn't really plan for, you've got money in your contingencies to take care of that, okay? Not so in federal contracting. You cannot put contingency value in your proposal. The reason for that is the federal government will negotiate a modification to a contract for any changes, whether they're taking work out of the contract, they're adding work into the contract, they had a contract clause that wasn't in the award. Anytime it costs you time and or money, it's done via a contract modification. So the government pays as they go, no contingencies in your price proposal. The last bullet there is Longshore and Harbor Workers' Compensation Act. This is a little known act, little known on the government contracting officer side and contractors. So for example, in the state of Washington, if you are working on navigable waterways, for which there are many, examples being Hood Canal, Puget Sound, the Pacific Ocean, Lake Chelan, Lake Washington, Kitsap Lake, rivers, lots of navigable waterways. If you are performing work over, on, under, or next to a navigable waterway, and an employee of yours gets sick, injured, or dies, the state of Washington, L&I, does not cover those claims. They will deny the claim. Few people know that. I actually have experience in about 2016 or 17, working out at the Naval Submarine Base, contracting officer out there. And a contractor had work on a pier down in the Hood Canal. That evening, the weather was bad, a storm, there was waves on the Hood Canal, the ship was tied up, the people were working, an employee fell off the dock down into the water. The ship came up and crushed him against the pier. He died. The family filed a claim with the state of Washington, L&I. The claim was denied because the state of Washington under L&I does not cover work along navigable waterways. So the family then submitted a claim to the U.S. Department of Labor. Closest office is in Seattle. There is a division of Department of Labor just for Longshore and Harbor Workers' Compensation Act. They submitted a claim. The company for which the employee was working for ended up having to pay like a $2 million claim for loss of life. They had to sell their assets. After selling all their assets, they still had a balance on the claim. Company went out of business, and the act states that the principals of the company are now liable for the balance of the claim. So the president, the vice president, the CEO, the secretary, the treasurer, all had to pay then the balance of that personal liability. So this is very important. And you can see I have an asterisk there. We have a class just on Longshore and Harbor Workers' Compensation Act. Very important to be knowledgeable about that. And if you have a solicitation that's going to be working around navigable waterways, you need to know about the insurance. And it is not inexpensive. It's typically on average about 23% of the value of your labor that is subject to the act. So it's not inexpensive. We get very deep into the class on that act. Any questions on cover letter or price proposal before we move on to the technical proposal on the next slide?
I have a question on taxes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if Auburn, I'm in Auburn, and I don't know if they have B&O taxes, but let's just say they don't. So I would have to include Washington State B&O, but let's say I am doing a job for Bremerton that you said does have, but I work remote. Does it matter if I do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. I haven't had that question before, but that's a good question. You know,
All of my work is remote.
yeah. Typically, architect engineering firms, consulting firms are working out of their corporate office or their home as opposed to working on the base. I don't want to give a definitive answer on that for fear of giving the wrong answer. You could contact the state, the city, the county to seek an answer to that question. I'm not sure which way that would go.
Okay.
I would love to know the answer to that question.
Okay, thanks.
I happen to have hard copy of the B&O taxes for state of Washington, cities and counties. So let's look that up. So the other things you need to be mindful of, if the world is flat, you can be competing for requirements, say for federal agencies, for any state in the United States. So let me just give you a brief rundown of the 8 states that levy a B&O tax. Washington, that's us here. Oregon, our neighbor. Tennessee, Texas, Delaware, Michigan, Nevada, and Ohio. So if you are competing for the award of contract and it's going to be performed in any of those 8 states, you're going to be paying B&O tax to that state. But be mindful too that especially for cities, there is a dollar value. If your value of your contract is less than that, there's no B&O tax. If it's greater than that, then they have a tax rate for various different categories like construction, supplies, services, whatnot, different rates. So each state can be different, cities can be different, counties can be different. All right. What was the city that you said? Des Moines?
I'm Auburn, Pierce County.
Auburn, yes, Auburn is on the list with 4 asterisks. All right.
Lovely.
Check the 4 asterisks. Okay, Auburn adapted a B&O tax effective January 1st, 2022. So
I win the prize.
yes, 6 months ago, they now have a B&O tax. Okay, and so on this list that you can get on the internet, it's at dor.wa.gov. DOR, Department of Revenue, WA for Washington, .gov for government. And you can find the tax rates for the state, for the cities, and the counties. So for example, so you mentioned Auburn. So it provides the phone number for the office. It provides we got 4 different categories: manufacturing, retail, services, and wholesale. And for Auburn, there's nothing for quarterly, it's annual, and it has a threshold of $500,000. So I'm assuming what that means is if the value of your contract is less than $500,000, then there's no tax to be paid. Okay. If it's greater than $500,000, then you got to look across to one of the 4 applicable categories, and there's the tax rate. So 2 of them are the same, and the other 2 are each different. So you gotta look up those tax rates and include them in your price proposal so you can get compensated for it. Because if you don't, then it's coming out of your profit. Okay?
Right. Right.
Same situation for indirect costs. Those companies that are clueless about indirect costs, whether you call it home office overhead or general administrative, whatever you want to call it, if you don't include it in your price proposal, you're doing a disservice for yourself because you're not paying for the people in your home office. You know, the direct cost is for performing the work out there on the site or wherever. But you've got expenses in your headquarters, in your home office, whether it's the printer, the computer, the utility bills, the lease or rent of the space, or if you're living out of your home, you're probably prorating your mortgage or whatnot for your office space. That is all indirect costs. And if you do not include your indirect costs in your price proposal and you happen to win the contract, well, what I tell clients is on day one, you are losing money. Okay, so I help companies understand what G&A and indirect costs are and help them compute it. I have a spreadsheet and whatnot to help them figure that out. What should be included, what can't be included, whatnot. You know, some items can be, depending on the contract, can be a direct cost. And in another situation, it may be an indirect cost. So it depends on the element, whether you can charge it as a direct cost or put it in your overhead pool as an indirect cost. Okay, so there's taxes.
Okay.
Right, very good subject. And a lot of companies are unaware of B&O tax. Okay, so if you don't include it in your price proposal, as I said, they're going to come knocking on your door to pay that tax. The state will come, the county will come, the city may come. And if you didn't put in your price proposal, it is coming out of your profit. Now you make less money. Okay. Any other questions on this sheet for cover letters and price proposals? Excellent questions. Okay, moving on. The technical proposal. So as I said, in large procurements, there are three components of a offer or a proposal, and that is your cover letter, your price proposal, and your technical proposal. So here are some typical elements that you will find in solicitation for your technical proposal. I've asterisked two of those. Those two will always be in every technical, every solicitation for a technical proposal. The government always evaluates experience, and the government is required to check your past performance. We talked about earlier that when you award the contract, the two things after award, remember, you want to ask for a debrief, and the other thing is you're working for your performance evaluation. It's all about customer service after award, fulfilling the requirement for the federal agency. So when a contracting officer receives your proposal, even if they didn't ask for your past performance ratings, they are required to check your past performance. So they will go up to a website called Peepers and look for your company and look for similar work, size, scope, and complexity, and find out how that agency evaluated you, either interim performance evaluations and especially at the end after the job was done, a performance evaluation. Was it satisfactory? Was it marginal? Was it outstanding? There's a scale of 5. Satisfactory is in the middle. There's 2 below and 2 above. And so every agency has to do the research on your past performance, and they go to the website and it's there for the last 5 years. So if you had a contract, whether it was one contract or one of 10 contracts that had a performance evaluation less than satisfactory, could be detrimental to you getting the award of this contract. Right, so other technical proposal criteria is approach. What is your approach to fulfilling the requirement? If it's, for example, construction, they will ask you for your safety ratings. That will get evaluated. Quality control. What is your approach for quality control to fulfilling this requirement? So those are some typical technical proposal factors that you'll have to address in your technical proposal. Any questions on technical proposals? Okay, next slide. Basis for award. Every large procurement will tell you Typically, solicitations are issued as uniform contract format, UCF. And that is uniform contract format has sections A through M. K is representations and certifications, but because you have provided those in SAM, you don't need to submit them in your proposal. The solicitation will say, if you've done it in SAM, just go to paragraph 5D and say that your representations and certifications are in SAM. You're good. Okay. Section L is instructions to the offerer. That is a very important section. You need to completely understand it. It is giving you your instructions of how to submit your proposal, what needs to be submitted. Section M is basis for award. This is the section that says how your proposal will be evaluated. And other information here. The first bullet, federal agencies now, for the most part, are saying they plan to make award without discussions. As a result of that, bullet number 2, so your first proposal needs to be your best proposal, because if they're not going to enter into discussions, you won't have an opportunity to correct your mistakes. So your first proposal needs to be your best proposal. And the last bullet there addresses responsiveness versus responsibility. We've been talking about this throughout the class. Responsiveness is on you. You need to follow the instructions in the solicitation. The solicitation says submit the following 10 things, and you only submitted 9, you are non-responsive. They may not even evaluate your proposal. Depends on the agency, depends on how many proposals, offers that they get, whether they will even consider yours or not, because you are non-responsive. Responsibility is on the agency's contracting officer. They are doing a background check on your ability to perform. So it's responsive is on you and responsibility is on the government. Any questions on basis for award? Post-award. So after the contract is awarded, you were the successful offer or you weren't the successful offer. We've mentioned this a couple of times already today. It's always ask for a debrief, whether you win or lose. So often the unsuccessful offers ask for a debrief and the successful offer doesn't. Hey, why do I need to ask for a debrief? I won it. They evaluated my proposal. It was the best and I got the award. Wrong answer. If you even won the contract, you need to ask for a debrief. And what happens in a debrief is the agency has a discussion with you and tells you how they evaluated your proposal. Just because you won the contract doesn't mean you had a stellar proposal. It may have had some weaknesses in it, some things that were marginal. So that's why you want to ask for a debrief, because it will help you improve the next time you write a proposal to compete for the award of a contract. Typically, there are always things that you can improve upon in a proposal. What's important on a debrief is when you get a notification from the contracting officer that you were a unsuccessful offer, that letter will state how many offers, how many contractors competed for the award of the contract. They will identify who won the contract and provide some contact information, how it was funded. But there'll also be a paragraph in there that says that if you are interested in getting a debrief, respond and tell us who is going to attend from your company the debrief. It will also say that you have to request the debrief within 3 days after you were notified of the award. And that requirement comes from FAR Part 15. 15 is negotiated procurements, subparagraph 506. So remember, after award, it's all about customer satisfaction is key for your future contracts. Because if your contract meets the dollar threshold, the agency must prepare and submit a performance evaluation on your contract, and it gets submitted up to the internet, and all federal agencies can see it for 5 years. So you don't want to be less than satisfactory. You should also assume that every contract is going to be modified. So you're going to have to go through preparing a cost proposal, for example, for a modification to a contract. You can see there, I also have a red asterisk. We have a class dedicated just to contract modifications. Talk about the various types and all the issues with contract modifications. All right, any questions on post-award? Think you'll be interested? Yes.
I do have something because it's been kind of hit or miss to receive those debriefs. Maybe contracting officers, they just get overcome by events, or maybe they just don't want to give debriefs. I know that I've asked for them, and only a couple times I have received them. But you know, other than the number who competed, winning amounts, you know, things like you said, the winning company, what things should I be looking for in a debrief? Because ultimately I do want to get better. And that's usually what I write to them and saying, hey, I know I didn't win. You know, I'd like to receive a debrief, you know, but now when I do get that, yes, okay, let's debrief. Like here today, tomorrow, I should be doing one for one that I did not. You know, what things should I be looking for?
Okay, so in the federal acquisition regulation, it provides the guidance as to what the federal agency can disclose to you and what the federal agency cannot disclose to you. So what's really important here that I provided on this slide in parentheses there is FAR Part 15.506. That's a section that you can go to and see everything that the agency is required to debrief you on, information to provide to you. Realize that, well, two things. So you mentioned, and I'm making an assumption here, that in the unsuccessful offers letter to you, that there was a paragraph that says, if you want a debrief, contact us and typically tell us who's going to attend. If that was the case and they did not do that, you can follow up on that and said, you know, you offered a debrief. I requested a debrief within the 3 days and you haven't done it yet. Let's schedule a date to do that. That's one avenue.
What you mentioned as far as that unsuccessful letter, I've never received one of those.
Oh, okay.
And the one agency that did a formal, they sent me a slide, you know, 4 or 5 slides and discussed it, you know, Army Material Command. I thought that was fantastic. The other agency, the National Oceanic folks, he phoned me and he just gave me, you know, quick points over the phone. But I think like what you mentioned and I've seen this in, you know, not every solicitation or, you know, sources sought or RFP or RFQ has been standardized, although there's sections, like you say, they don't always follow. I know on the big ones, they do because they don't want people to, you know, question it and all the legal stuff. But what I've seen personally is, you know, some of those standards, it's, you know, contracting officer dependent. So I guess I'm just trying to standardize for my own self. Hey, I should look for, you know, this type stuff, you know, pricing, you know, what was it that disqualified me or what things, you know, I mean, I guess just asking for my assessment on how I did in comparison to that. I mean, is that kind of the foundational question? Hey, what is it that I didn't score or did score well on? Is that proper?
That is correct. In FAR 15.506, they will identify what the federal agency can release to you and what they will do, and also what they cannot release to you. So what they cannot release to you is how they evaluated your competitors. What they can release to you is how they evaluated your proposal. You know, all aspects of the proposal, the cover letter, the price proposal, the technical proposal. So realize that what we're talking about here is large procurement. Those are the procurements over $250,000. So every federal agency has different rules and procedures that they go by. I came from the Department of Defense. Our process was or large procurements. When I say large procurements, those over $250,000, we had to issue unsuccessful letters to each of the unsuccessful offerers. And in there, it said who was a successful offerer. It also gave the opportunity to request a debrief within 3 days and tell us who's going to attend from your company, so on and so forth. So you have to respond within 3 days, but the agency is supposed to schedule it within 5 days after that. But, you know, it depends on the availability of the debriefer. It depends on the workload, all that kind of stuff. I mean, even I had to schedule them like out 10 days after I received a request. So also realize that an agency can offer a debrief in any number of different ways. One can be by telephone. One can be by written debriefs. You submit the questions, they provide, submit the questions in writing, they submit the answers in writing for those that are allowed in FAR Part 15.506. It could be nowadays, because of the pandemic, it could be virtual. It could be on Zoom or Google or Microsoft virtual meeting place. It can be in person. You know, nowadays contractors are all over the United States, so typically they're not going to fly in to do a debrief, although that I have experienced that, where I'm here in the Puget Sound area and a company flies in from Tennessee because it was a large procurement. You know, we're talking about a 5-year contract, $45 million a year. This is a big deal. So they fly in for a debrief. They send in a team of 3 people, you know. So it can be in person, it can be across the table, it could be virtual or whatnot. So realize that each agency will do it differently, and it also depends on the contract and where the contractors are located as to the type of debrief it may be. It could be on an instant contract that it's a local contractor and one is from Tennessee. The local one will do it in person, and the one from Tennessee, it might be virtual or it might be by telephone. But it's the FAR regulation that identifies what it is that can be released to you, the contractor, and what cannot be released. So for example, the things that cannot be released is they cannot tell you how they evaluated your competitors. What they're going to do is go through your proposal. They'll go through the business clearance that they had to write up and get approved for the award of the contract. And they will look at each element of your price proposal and tell you how it was evaluated. They will look at each technical proposal evaluation factor, like experience, approach, past performance, safety, whatever, each of those evaluation factors, and they will identify your evaluation score and what it is that was very good, what was satisfactory, what was marginal. So that will help you the next time you put a proposal together for award of another contract. Did I cover your question?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, moving on. Got one more slide. So what I was talking about in contractor performance evaluations. It's initiated in CPARs by the government. You get an opportunity in CPARs to respond to the draft evaluation. And then the contracting officer looks at your response, and either they make the changes or they modify the changes, or they do not agree with what you said, and their evaluation stands as is. So what I've identified here on this slide is there are every one of these types of contracts has a different threshold for when a performance evaluation needs to be executed. So we had one person that was interested in architect engineering. If the value of your contract or your task order exceeds $35,000, a performance evaluation must be executed in accordance with the federal acquisition regulation. A number of you were interested in service contracts. Service contracts, the value of the contract needs to exceed $1 million. If it is less than that, the performance evaluation does not need to be executed. Now, in my last couple of years as a contracting officer, I did have one company who had I think it was a service contract, but it was less than $1 million. And they asked me if I would prepare a performance evaluation so they could provide it in another proposal for award of another contract. I did it. The contracting officer does not need to do it. So, it will depend on the contractor's availability with their time. So often, so much that all the federal agencies have a shortage of contract specialists / contracting officers. So their time is very valuable, and often they all work overtime. So whether they are amenable to taking the time to write one up, it depends on their agency and them. So expectations is low. If your value of your contract is less than these dollar values, you probably will not get a performance evaluation. But if it exceeds this, the agency is required to execute a performance evaluation, give you an opportunity to provide comments if you take exception to anything, or you got a satisfactory on one of the elements and you thought you should get something more than that. I've seen that a lot. Or if you were rated a marginal, you take exception to that. The evaluation says, well, the contractor did this, this, and this, and as a result, they got a marginal. And you may respond and say, that's not true. That did not happen. This is what happened. So you provide a rebuttal. The contracting officer may stand his ground and not change it, or he does his research and says, oh yeah, he's right. I'm going to change that. So maybe comes up from a marginal to a satisfactory. So your performance evaluations are very, very important because they will haunt you for the next 5 years. Okay, so then we have construction, IT, ship repair, and the last category, if it's not any of the 5 above, then it's $250,000. Any question on performance evaluations?
Terry, you mentioned that they're there for 5 years. Is that true?
Yes. The performance evaluation gets posted up to the internet. All federal agencies, as I mentioned before, a contracting officer is required, it's mandatory that they check past performance. So what they will do is go up to that website, look up your company, and see if there are any performance evaluations. And there will be if your contract type in the past is any one of these and it exceeds that dollar value, there's required to be a performance evaluation that's going to be up there on that website, and it will be up on that website for 5 years. So that's why I say it's so important after award, customer service. You are working towards getting a performance evaluation that is at least a satisfactory, because it's going to be posted up there if it exceeds these dollar values, and all federal agencies have access to that for 5 years. So if you do poorly, all the agencies can see that you did poorly last year on a contract, and say it was a construction job and it was $800,000. There's a performance evaluation up there and you got a marginal. All the federal agencies can see that. If they're about to award a construction contract, they will look at the performance evaluation and see if it's size, scope, and complexity, and if it's similar, and it's going to be evaluated in their business clearance, and you may not be the top rated company because one of the evaluation factors is past performance. That is mandatory. Did I address your question?
Perfect. Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anybody else have questions on the thresholds or performance evaluations? All right, we've done questions all along. Does anybody else have any questions on anything in this class or similarly related before we go into our summary? Okay, we'll go into the summary. All right. So at the very beginning, we talked about the steps in sequence. Registration, you're given an MPIN number. Then you move on to finding solicitations. Then you will review the solicitation and make that go or no-go decision to compete for the award of the contract. A point of failure is the next bullet, is preparing your proposal and submitting it in accordance with the solicitation. Next is the contracting officer from the agency evaluates your proposal. And the next one, the contracting officer makes the award. After that,
two important factors is asking for the debrief post-award. And lastly, you are working for a performance evaluation of at least satisfactory. So in summary, we talked about three important numbers. They are your MPIN number, your UEI, and your cage code. Write these down when you get them, safeguard them because you will need them over and over and over again. Every time you go into sam.gov, you'll need your MPIN. When you communicate with the agencies and the agency's prime contractors, they're going to want your UEI number. They want to want your cage code because that's either one of those is how they will find you in the various databases. Another little tidbit here is each time you're about to submit a proposal for the award of a contract, you want to go into SAM, check your representations and certifications for each proposal that you submit, because you may change your answers depending on the solicitation and the proposal that you are submitting. But you want to make sure that they are complete and accurate and pertain to the proposal that you're submitting. So just a little tidbit there is check your reps and certs in SAM. Just as a final note there, you can go into washingtonptac.org, go to our calendar, and you can see all of our classes and events that are coming up. You can click on any of those. Registration, everything that we offer is free. And then you will be sent a link, just like you did for today's class. Click on it and you get into the class. Anything on this summary we want to talk about? Okay, so contact your local PTAC office for assistance for the Olympic Peninsula. Here it is Kathy Kokis. There's her phone number, her email address. And if you're outside the Olympic Peninsula or anywhere else in the state, go to washingtonptac.org to find your local PTAC counselor. That's all I have. Anybody have? Kathy, anything to add?
No, and I do not see any outstanding questions.
Okay, it's 10:30, so it was 2.5 hours. It was longer than my previous classes. I guess I provided more detail.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully you all got something out of this. Any class that you attend that you can walk away with a tidbit of information was worth attending. Leslie, any comments?
Well, I thought you did an exceptional, precise presentation. There's so much to digest, particularly for our clients, that the next steps for them, if you're confused or, can't figure stuff out, as Terry said, contact one of your local PTACs, and we're all over the state and we're all over the nation. But if you're Washington PTAC, we kind of help each other, with areas that we may not be experts on, but Terry's pretty much an expert. So he's a good resource for you to have.
Experienced contracting officer with the federal government for 29 years. So I've seen it on the pre-award and the post-award, and I can help. If I can't help, then I can guide you to where you can get help. Okay.
Yeah, so if you are not in Washington, of course, we always love it when you attend our classes, but we will ask that then you go to the PTAC in your state for the one-on-one assistance.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you all for attending. Hopefully you got something out of it. Have a wonderful weekend.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.